Hello, everyone. My name is Doa Kinde. Everyone calls me ID. Welcome to welcome to episode 11 of season 4 of our Dear Founder Startup Building series. Season 4 is all about team validation. We've discussed a lot of topics. We've addressed co-founder conflict. We've addressed team market conflict, team market misfits. We've addressed who is a co-founder, what do you look for in search, what are the attributes to search for in co-founders, co-founder candidates, what do you do when you find, and we're just discussing a couple of other things. How do you distribute equity? How do you share equity? How do you have a reasonable conversation around equity? In this particular episode, we're going to be talking about valuation methods, right? Because whenever you are going to bringing onboard new members onto your team, I have said in many previous episodes that you should have that conversation about equity early on. Whenever you have that conversation about equity, somehow that equity conversation will directly or indirectly lead to a notion of valuation. Even if it's not spoken out loud, there will be an implied valuation of the company that we're all working on in everybody's heads. So you might as well address the elephants in the room. You might as well address the topic. You might as well talk about valuation. So this particular episode 11, the second to last in this particular season 14 validation, is dedicated to discussing valuation, early startup valuation in the very early stages. Okay, so you find that, one second, you often find that founders struggle to articulate what could be a reasonable valuation figure for their startup. Usually when they are getting close to conversations with investors, when they are building relationships with investors, or just when they are even speaking with fellow founders, or fellow ecosystem participants, right? Ecosystem people, right? They often have to, the question often comes up, what's your current valuation? What valuation are you looking at? What, and stuff like that. The challenge, the tricky thing is that for most of the founders that I interact with, the huge majority of them are early stage pre-seed. Therefore, at that stage, there are a couple of standard traditional valuation methods that are not appropriate for startups at that stage. Okay, so if you look at the list on the screen, I've actually stricken those things out. So you'll see that discounted cash flow, that's probably the most popular method of valuation that everybody has heard about, right? And essentially, it takes into account what is the cash flow of a business. Can we apply a discount factor to it? And can we say, okay, this business handles 0.7 or 0. Whatever, X of X $1 million or X, million naira, and then you take that as your valuation figure, that, and then you value the business at that figure. Okay. Price to earnings ratio is also something that can lead you toward a valuation. Price to sales ratio also can lead you toward a valuation. Those first three that are stricken out are actually optimized for later stage companies, okay? For companies that are mature, companies that have a steady cash flow, stable and steady cash flow, okay? But there is reprieve. There are two methods that early stage investors, usually angels, okay, and sometimes more recently, some VCs have pivoted to pay more attention to the early stage part of the market. So sometimes VCs also employ this, but it's majorly the tool of angels, right? Angel investors. Angel investors usually use two methods. One of them is called the benchmark or the scorecard method, and the other is called the potential value at exit method. So in this episode, we'll look at the first one, which is a benchmark and scorecard method. There's a screenshot there, but we'll come back to that screenshot. Let's look at the live thing. So this is the link. If you type this into your browser, it will take you to the Excel that you will see shortly. Let's take a break and let's go to the Google Chrome. And there you are. So the scorecard method, right, assumes the scorecard method, you know, or the benchmark method, probably more appropriate to be called the benchmark method, uses the thinking, the principle, the idea that, oh, you are early stage. I get it. You don't have revenues. You don't have a lot of things. You probably don't even have products, or you don't have a stable product yet. You know, you don't have a lot of things. But are there any similar companies in your sector who have progressed? Are there any similar companies in your sector that have received some type of valuation from other investors? If yes, well, if no, then perhaps the scorecard method is not appropriate, and then we'll look at the potential value at exit method later. But if yes, then can we find the average of the valuations of all the startups in your region, in your sector, essentially all the startups that are under the same competitive forces as you? Same region, same sector, probably same stage, well, you know, and so on and so forth, right? So if you look at the key assumptions section cell there, under the key assumptions, the first thing I noted there is pre-seed startups in this region, okay, Africa, for instance, are usually valued between $1 million and $3 million, okay? Assumption one. Assumption two, the average valuation, if you take, so let's say there's 500 startups in that data set. If you take their average, you land on $2 million, just for discussion purposes. It may not be, but just for discussion purposes, $2 million, okay? If this is the case, if these two assumptions hold true, then let's look at the following factors. You take something called, well, if you notice, each of these factors, and these are factors for evaluating a startup, but each of these factors has a different weighting, okay, or different weight. So the strength of the management team is 30%, and anybody is free to modify these weights and reorder it or change those numbers, those percentages as they feel, as they deem fit. So this, I may use this because it's standard from the formula. You may not feel comfortable with it, or another investor may not feel comfortable with it. Feel free to change it as long as you have a plausible, reasonable explanation, or at least, you know, way to explain your reasoning behind the new percentage structure that you have. And as long as everything adds up to 100%, you're good to go. So we can discuss this later, but if you deal with a wide enough data set of startups, you will discover that ultimately product excellence, technology excellence, marketing excellence, and so on and so forth, are not as important in a startup success, in predicting a startup success, as the quality of the management or the leadership team. The management and the leadership team are everything in a startup. They determine execution speed, they determine culture, they determine attention to detail, they determine customer focus, whether it even exists or not, whether this business is all about making money or this business is all about helping customers solve their daily problems, and money is a side effect. Money is a byproduct. You know, the strength of the management team, for this reason, I have decided to give it a rating of 30%, okay? Size of the opportunity, how large is this opportunity? 20%. Product and technology, you know, and so you have this ranking. So this is standard. And if you look at this, following the evaluation factors, and this is standard. So I deliberately left this as standard so that it remains as a reference point. Now, let's go to the bottom here. Let's say that our new startup is something called Renew. Since we used Renew in the business model canvas, let's just use Renew here, okay? Let's say this is the startup name, okay? Renew. Strength of the management team. Now, the rubric lifted straight from here is 30, 20, 15, 10, 10, 10, 5. Okay, and that's that. Now, under conformity, what am I saying? I'm saying, oh, when I compare, as an investor, when I compare Renew to the average startup in Africa, the same sector, same geography, maybe same stage, and so on and so forth. When I compare them, I feel like the management team of Renew is 300% as effective as the average management team. Oh, so you see where we're going with this. So these are like benchmarks, the average. Okay, so your own particular startup then gets these scores here. So I'm saying by putting 300 here, and I could have put 70% here to say that, and that takes us to 104%, right? But I if I put 70% here, what am I saying? I'm saying the strength of the management team, of the strength of Renew's management team is only 70% as strong as the average startup management team in Africa. Okay, within this range of the specific data sets that we are focusing on, those that are worth between 1 and 3, whose average is 2 million, right? So you do that thing, and then if I return that size of the opportunity, I think this market size, this opportunity size is 150%, is 1.5x the average. Okay, this is 3x the average, 1.5x the average. I think the product and technology is just about the same. Product technology excellence is just about the same. Competitive environment is just about the same. Competitive factors affecting them. I think that the effectiveness or the advantage that this startup has, marketing-wise, sales-wise, partnership-wise, is about 125%, which is 1.25x. Okay, and so on and so forth. So these are my subjective evaluations as an investor of the relative assessment of this Renew startup along these criteria, these evaluation criteria. And so if you multiply these two, which is what you see in the formula here, if you multiply 30% by 300%, you then get these values. You add up these values and you get something that should be more than, well, if you modify enough values, something that should be more than 100%, or at least 100% if you kept the values constant. Using the values that we supplied, 300, 150, we got 173%. What that means now is that in results, what that means is that where the average startup in this region is valued at $2 million, actually, this particular startup that we are dealing with, using this metric that we've used, Renew will be worth, where I'm going to assign Renew a valuation of 2 million times 173%, which is what we have here. Okay, 2 million times 1.73, and that gives us $3.46 million as the valuation for Renew. Okay, and this is defensible. This is plausible. This is reasonable, right? You can have a reasonable logical argument with someone, about, I don't think it's 300%. Why shouldn't it be 500%? Look at those guys. I know them. I've worked with them before. I know their pedigree. I know their profile. I think that should be 500%. Another person could say, maybe on the investment committee team, another person would say, I disagree. I don't think so. I get what you're saying. I hear what you're saying, but I think that 500% is too much. Let's make it 450, or let's make it 400%. So you can have serious conversations about this, and then you can agree on a figure, and then finally calculate this. 173% may then become 250%, or 173% may become 50%, whatever that is, right? So you then take that percentage and multiply it by your average valuation figure that you defined in the key assumptions to get your valuation for this specific startup. So in a nutshell, this is how to use the scorecard method for early stage startup valuation in those stages of the startup journey where there is not enough data or economic activity going on in the startup to establish a reasonable logical valuation. So that's that. Thank you very much. We're not going yet. We still have one more method to look at. So let's go back to our slides and take a look at, 1 second. Yeah, there we are. So we looked at the benchmark method, which is also called the scorecard method already. And we just got back from the browser. Everything that we went through is exactly what's on this screen. So there's no need to, explain it. It's pretty much self-explanatory. The next one, so at this point, I'd like to stop here. And then in the next video, we'll discuss. Yes, in the next video, we'll discuss the potential value at exit method. Thank you.